How can you adapt a story of biblical proportions into an animated film?
We struggled a bit trying to figure out what it was we wanted to tell because this was a giant story.
That was Brenda Chapman. She has worked on lots of iconic movies and is the director of Brave and the Prince of Egypt, which is a retelling of the story of Moses from the book of Exodus, and one of my favorite animated movies that my family and I used to watch together every Easter. Today's video is all about adaptations, and while there are no 10 commandments on how to write an adapted script, Brenda and I will share with you 7 essential tips that can elevate your story into an epic experience. Hi, I'm screenwriter Pietro Schito, and welcome to Write for Animation. Subscribe to become a better storyteller. Inspiration to adapt a story into an animated film can come from classic fairy tales and stories, myths and legends, comics, historical events, video games, music, and emojis. Inspiration can come from anywhere, so think outside the box. What is something that may seem crazy but could be adapted into an animated film? Have some fun and share your ideas in the comments below. Now, if you want to write a great adaptation, you must pick a story that is meaningful to you. Maybe it's the characters, the setting, or the theme. Pick a story that inspires you.
It just has to speak to me. I want it to feel truly emotional. Some writers, I'm going to put some heart in here, and they don't really feel it. So it's authenticity. Do you feel a connection to it? Does it touch you in some way? Does it speak to you? And then you have to decide how it needs to be adapted for a film. I like to honor what it is I'm given and not change it. There's a reason you want to do this story, so you need to honor that.
Let my people go!
Still gnawing away at that bone, are we?
Of course, anything can be adapted, but not everything is free to be adapted. A good rule of thumb is to make sure that you have the rights to adapt that story. If the material is not part of the public domain, find who owns the rights and learn if you can acquire them to avoid legal troubles.
The law clearly states the punishment for such a crime: death.
Alright, you've chosen your story, now it's time to transform it into a movie. To do that, start by identifying the essential plot events of the story that you are adapting. What is the core theme of the story, and how does the plot relate to the theme? Make a list of all the major moments that you must include. In other words, outline all the major events from the original story.
The nice thing about adapting things is that you do have parameters, and so it's harder to go off on the wild goose chases unless it's a filmmaker who's like, well, that's a nice idea, but I'm going over here. But I like to, as I say, honor the material and try to stay within that.
Imagine if the Prince of Egypt had omitted the 10 plagues or the iconic passage into the Red Sea. That would have been disappointing, right? Being original means understanding what the source material is all about and then putting your own spin on it. Even though the movie closely follows the Exodus story, Brenda and her team realized that the most important part of the story was actually one of the key relationships in the film.
The other two directors, Simon and Steve, and I, we struggled a bit trying to figure out what it was we wanted to tell, because this was a giant story that you can't go off on tangents. You have to keep those tent poles, otherwise people are going to go crazy. So we were just trying to figure out how we could tell it without leaning too heavily on the religious aspect of it, because we knew we had an audience that feel a connection to the story. But it was when we found the human story, the story of the two brothers, that's when we could, okay, we know what has to happen. We know the set piece. Now we can get into the emotional core of that story, and this is how we would tell it. That helped us understand the story we needed to tell within the bigger story.
Ramesses, please, you must listen.
I will not be the weak link.
Ramesses carries the weight of being Pharaoh, while Moses feels guilt and anger over the suffering of his people. It's because we understand their deep love for each other that their mutual betrayal feels so human and relatable.
Being a sibling, I was the youngest of 5, so I knew what it was like to be the younger sibling. I mean, I was nothing like Moses, but we could all relate to that, having siblings or friends that you're really close to. It's loving someone where you really want the best for them, but then the circumstances turn it where you're then opposed. So it's taking those ideas and trying to figure out, okay, these people really love each other, but they are so on the opposite side of what they believe, how do you bring them together? How does that play out in their story? It's just trying to find those human connections.
In my heart, you are my brother. But things cannot be as they were.
What's the heart of your story? What message do you want to share? In other words, find your version of the story and expand your outline with all the minor events that support what resonates with you. Some adaptations remain very faithful, while others reinvent the original material. It's the unique changes that you will make that will make your version special.
Many adaptations where they've totally gone off what the original material was, and it always kind of confuses me. But my approach is to honor what's there and see how it can be turned into something visual.
Because writing an adaptation or any script is hard when you're doing it all by yourself, why not join the WFA Animation Academy, where you learn and connect with other storytellers like you. Gain feedback, improve your script, and take your storytelling skills to the next level. Join today from writeforanimation.com/academy. The link is down below, and I hope to see you on our next session.
Oftentimes in a book, you'll have to take out pieces because you don't have the time to put everything up on screen. So you have to go in and try to find the essence of what that story is and what you feel are the important moments that definitely need to be on screen. But again, the characters are the main thing, and what they're going through and what they're feeling and what their arcs are. The plot to me is secondary to making sure those characters are authentic. I mean, that was the hardest part, and we were struggling.
Sometimes a narrative element is missing from the original material. There's not much humor in the Bible, but in an animated film, the drama needs to be balanced with comedy.
Trying to figure out where to put the humor. For the longest time, the two priests were these wacky, and Moses had a sidekick, and there were animals, and it was just the wacky Moses movie, and it just couldn't be that. Just like, this is not feeling right, and struggling with that until we realized humor is not going to be like all the old animated films. We just can't do it that way. We're going to do this story. We have to commit to what this story is. The priests have some humor, yes, but it was subdued and put into context.
It became very elegant narratively.
Thank you. We tried.
Rest assured, Your Majesty.
Yes, we are going to demonstrate the superior might of our gods.
As you learned from Brenda, it's normal for writers to add or cut things. Sometimes a small portion of the original material gets expanded into an entire film.
I think I've seen it more in live action films than animated necessarily, but trying to be too accurate to the source material, and that trying to cram everything in, that things go by too quickly. And I think that would be hard.
Keep your storytelling sharp, adjust for pace, and embrace the length of the medium. Some of the most impressive moments in The Prince of Egypt are scenes with lots of visual symbolism. The devastation from the 10 plagues, the epic magnitude of Moses parting the Red Sea, the mystical nature of the death of the firstborn. Even the more intimate moments are expressed through character movement and action. Here's an exercise for you. Take a scene that relies on the dialogue and transform it so that no character ever speaks. How can you translate dialogue into actions and express emotions without saying a word? Film is a visual medium, so show, don't tell.
That scene where he crumples down the wall and cries, we didn't need the dialogue. You just felt what he was feeling. Had to have that feeling of grief before we could move forward. Simon and Steve and I, all three, fought very hard for that scene because this was Moses' brother, and that was the backbone of that story, was this brother's relationship. So there's no way Moses could just skip away, and it didn't feel right not showing how it affected him.
When you show instead of telling, you can find deep moments like that. Most original material comes from a known visual medium, like a book, but it's up to you to transform it into a compelling movie to watch. That's what Brenda Chapman will teach you in this video, where you'll learn why skipping dialogue might be the best thing to do to write visually and improve your storytelling skills. So click on the video. I'm Pietro, this is WFA Animation, and I'll see you there.